I want to explain why sales team development, sales training if you like, starts with stories. That may not be very obvious, so I'm going to step you through why developing your critical company stories is the best way to think about developing a team. The first story you need to think about is your company's strategy story. That's the story that explains how your company started, how it nearly failed maybe, how it succeeded, how you got your best clients, and where you're going. That story, which I've shown here as a little narrative arc, and I'll use that throughout this video, that story is what inspires and motivates your sales team to continue. It's the story that allows them to introduce themselves and to place themselves as an important part in your company. So it's the first story. Now let's think about traditional sales training, the components of sales development, sales enablement. Traditionally, that would start with prospecting. There's no reason to interrupt the day of a potential client, a potential buyer, unless you have one of two stories to interest them. You either have success story, shown here, of a client like them that succeeded with your products or services, or you have an insight story, something that your company knows about their market that they could profitably learn from. Success stories and insight stories are how you engage a potential client. Those stories in themselves are typically too long to interrupt a client with, so we cut those into half stories just to create curiosity and interest. Next, the meeting. How do we have a conversation with a potential buyer that allows them to trust us, to understand us, and then to open up, to explain how things are at their company? We do that by exchanging personal stories and company stories. If a salesperson can explain how they got to the position they are, and within that story show that they're an authority and that they can be trusted, then they'll be in a position to say something like, well, enough about me, what about you? And to get back the client's story. And I'm showing the client's story with a little cross in it, and the salesperson's personal story here with the P for personal story. They might also exchange company story, and then what about your company? How did you guys get to be where you are? These are stories that mean that when you start to ask questions of your prospective client, they're much more willing to answer those questions and to go deep and to explain how things really are. If you also tell the full success story at this time, the one that you use to get your client's attention, then you can say something at the end of it like, well, how are things around here? And you'll get the situation about how things are there. So this is how we teach meeting skills. It's a combination of storytelling and intelligent questions. You need both. Now it's time to make a proposal, to write back what you've heard in this discovery meeting. This is also a form of story. Now we're starting to craft the client's future story. Here's how things were with them. Here are the problems and challenges they had. Here's how they met you, and here's how things will go in the future for them if they go with your company. Now we've reached the stage where it's necessary to come in and present to the stakeholders, maybe people we haven't met yet, in a sales presentation. A sales presentation is not like a marketing presentation. Here we're trying to get a decision made in the meeting. Again, it's a form of story. We're going to tell that story from the proposal, we're going to get a shared agenda, and we're going to place within that presentation mini stories that support our argument about why they should change and why they should consider a future with our company. Now it comes finally to negotiation. If you read books on sales negotiation, you'll appreciate that they're all stories. They're 100% storytelling. Why? Because that's how you learn negotiation skills. You learn from the stories of people who've done it before. And in fact, when you get into bigger deals, it's not so many people that have done it before. So you need to collect their stories. We call that the sales teaching story. It's the 7th story in the 7 Stories book. And there's one other story that's critically important for helping to close the deal, and that is value stories. Stories about the leaders in your organization, maybe not the CEO, but people who lead, who show the values of your company. How does your company behave after you sign the deal? Those stories form the framework, the basis for negotiation skills development. So to summarize, you want to develop your team. You already have people in your company that know how to sell, but how do you get that expertise to help your sales team find new clients, have productive discovery meetings, write in a way that's compelling, that's persuasive, present your company in the best light, and then negotiate to close the deal? It starts with stories at every stage. Your company's stories that need to be developed, that need to be shared, that need to be taught, that are then used in a way to get your clients' stories so that we create their story. At the end of the day, the only story that matters is the story that your client buys into and uses to change their organization. And that's their future success story. I hope I've been persuasive enough to explain that it's the stories that you tell and the stories that you get and the stories that you create that really develops your sales team. That's the path to developing a functioning, effective sales team. I'm Mike Adams.